Art and death have shared a quiet relationship for centuries. In paintings, literature, sculpture, and theater, artists have projected their darkest fears and their deepest subconscious thoughts into the work they leave behind. But there is one corner of the art world where this relationship takes an especially eerie turn: animation. Unlike static art, animation forces the creator to breathe life into something frame by frame, crafting movement, emotion, destiny, and sometimes death. In the process, a strange pattern of urban legends, tragic coincidences, and chilling hindsight has emerged. Animators who allegedly drew their own demise before it ever happened. Whether these tales are pure coincidence or subconscious prophecy, they continue to unsettle both fans and historians. What follows are 10 of the most persistent legends and case studies of animators whose final creations seem to foreshadow their own fate. The earliest story in this Star Countdown comes from the golden age of American animation, between the 1930s and 1950s, a time when slapstick violence and cartoon absurdity ruled the screen. According to animation folklore, one anonymous studio artist created a scene in which a character is killed in an over-the-top accident involving a falling safe or heavy object. Back then, no one questioned these violent gags. Audiences laughed, the studios profited, and animators cranked out gag after gag. But years later, legend says the same artist died in a freak accident eerily similar to the animated death: a heavy object falling in just the wrong place at just the wrong time. No evidence proves this story, but its longevity speaks volumes. Ironically, the data doesn't even align with slapstick being deadly in real life. A 2014 study found that animated children's films actually kill characters most often through murder or animal attacks, far from the piano drops and safe splats cartoons are famous for. That strange mismatch makes the studio rumor even creepier. Was the story exaggerated? Probably. But it marks the beginning of an idea, that animators might unintentionally sketch their own fate without realizing it. This legend centers on a lesser-known assistant animator from an East Asian studio, said to have worked on a somber early anime featuring destruction and collapse. According to the tale, the artist's final contribution was a subtle background drawing. Nothing flashy, just a collapsed structure or fatal accident hidden within the scenery. In an eerie twist, the animator supposedly died later in a real event mirroring that very scene, involving a falling object or structural failure. Whether or not the story is true, the psychological basis behind why people believe it is fascinating. Researchers often talk about hindsight interpretation, the human tendency to connect dots only after tragedy strikes. In animation, the connection becomes more personal and poetic. We imagine the artist trying to speak through their work, even if it's our imagination doing the speaking. Add to that the harsh working conditions reported in parts of the animation world: long hours, crushing deadlines, low pay, and these stories become easier to believe. Anxiety, exhaustion, and dread have a way of leaking into the art. Not every eerie case involves an accident. Some point to disease. One oft-repeated rumor claims that a classic-era animator drew a character slowly wasting away from a rare illness, only to later develop and die from that very condition. The legend often gets loosely tied to Disney's circle of artists, though no single name ever sticks to the story. What is real is the example people sometimes mention nearby: Walt Disney himself, a legendary creator who chain-smoked through screenings and brainstorming sessions, later dying of lung cancer. He never illustrated his death directly, but the contradiction between his fantastical worlds and his fatal habit gives the rumor a believable shadow. The human mind loves symbolism. We want illnesses to have meaning. So when we hear a story about an animator who unknowingly drew their own disease before it was diagnosed, it resonates. Whether it actually happened or not becomes almost secondary to the narrative power. It's the first story on this list where the prophecy isn't violent, just tragically intimate. Water has always been one of animation's most difficult challenges. Reflections, distortions, bubbles, movement, all bending light and motion in complicated ways. One European animator, known for mastering water sequences, reportedly poured heart and soul into a drowning scene that was unusually emotional and slow, focusing on the final moments of the character sinking beneath the surface. Years later, the artists themselves allegedly drowned in a freak outdoor accident. Again, we can't prove the legend, but water has a symbolic weight that sticks in our imagination. It represents fear, descent, helplessness, and surrender. When an animator draws a powerful drowning scene, we assume they understand that fear intimately. So when a drowning accident follows in reality, the audience creates a narrative link, even if fate was random and merciless. The myth persists because it feels poetic, tragic, inevitable. Many animators hide caricatures of themselves in crowd shots. It's a harmless, cheeky Easter egg, until it isn't. This legend tells of a mid-century artist who inserted tiny cartoon versions of himself into crowd scenes. In one film, his miniature self is shown suffering a sudden, absurd death, crushed, struck, or flung by randomness. Years later, the animator reportedly died in an equally absurd accident, the kind you might see played for laughs in a cartoon. Fans later pointed to the Easter egg as a cry from the future. It's the first story in the countdown where the prophecy was literal. The animator actually drew himself dying. From a psychology perspective, this one fascinates people because it feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy. He drew himself as a victim and later became one. Coincidence? Probably. But coincidences involving self-portraits hit differently. Car crashes and speeding chases are a staple of action animation, and legend holds that one layout artist crafted an unusually detailed shot of a deadly vehicle wreck, complete with a strange impact angle and violent metal distortion that stood out from the usual cartoon chaos. The same artist supposedly died in a real accident, mirroring the fictional one, right down to the angle and motion described in their storyboard. It's one of the most cinematic legends, and that's why it spread. It feels like the third act of a movie, tragic and dramatic. When real-world vehicle deaths happen suddenly, people search for narrative meaning. So when an animator dies in a way that resembles their drawings, we treat it like foreshadowing, even when there's no intent behind it at all. Now we enter the realm of Disney legend. While Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs 1937 enchanted the world, it also terrified audiences with its violent ending for the evil queen, struck by lightning, falling off a cliff, then crushed by a boulder. Rumor says one of the artists who animated part of her final moments died shortly after the film's release, sparking gossip that the scene took something out of him. Some versions claim a fall, others a heart attack, others stress-related collapse. Disney history is full of ghost stories and superstitions, dark tunnels under the happiest place on Earth. So this legend stuck. The Evil Queen's death scene is one of the earliest brutal on-screen endings in animation, and the idea that its darkness echoed back into the animator's real life makes the myth irresistible. This is one of animation's most disturbing urban legends. The idea that an animator secretly inserted a subliminal frame depicting suicide into a children's cartoon, and later took their own life. No studio has ever confirmed such a case, and most versions contradict one another, yet the story refuses to die. It taps into two cultural fears: hidden messages in media, and the silent suffering of artists. Unlike other stories on this list, this one deals with intentional imagery. The legend suggests the animator used their work as a private confession, a last message the world wasn't meant to see until after they were gone. It likely never happened, but it spreads because it grapples with a harsh reality. Animation is an industry where overwork, depression, and isolation are more common than people admit. The legend scares us because it feels psychologically possible. In Japan, the word karoshi means death by overwork. In animation, the idea hits close to home. This widely told story claims a veteran animator, known for grueling hours and perfectionist dedication, spent his final months drawing a scene of a character collapsing. Then, during a marathon work session, the animator allegedly suffered a fatal heart attack at the studio, collapsing just like the character he'd drawn. Whether true or exaggerated, this one resonates more than any other because it reflects a very real danger. Animation can consume a person's life from the inside out. When fans retell this legend, they're not just talking about fate, they're criticizing the industry that drives people to exhaustion. The prophecy here isn't mystical, it's systemic. The number one story in this mythology is the most dramatic and the hardest to verify. An animator who completed one last sequence, often involving suffocation, fire, smoke, or a fatal element, and then died in a real event eerily similar to the scene they created. A house fire, a gas leak, smoke inhalation. The legend changes from retelling to retelling, but the core remains. The final frame, the final breath, the final coincidence. This is the story people point to when they claim animators can draw their destiny. It ties together everything: subconscious fear, overwork, symbolism, coincidence, and tragedy, into one haunting question. Do artists predict their fate, or do we rewrite fate backward after the fact? In truth, there is no proven case in which an animator literally predicted their own death. These stories are a blend of coincidence, grief, superstition, and the poetic human urge to find meaning in tragedy. Yet the legends thrive because animation is unlike any other art form. Animators don't just paint a moment, they paint movement, impact, pain, risk, danger, and sometimes death. Frame by frame, they imagine endings. And when their own ending finally arrives, we can't help searching those frames for clues that were never really there. Maybe that's the final eerie message. Not that animators draw their fate, but that death always leaves us desperate to find a story that makes sense of it.